Welcome to the Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share that passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with a Latina perspective. Welcome to Season 10, where I'm talking with Latinas who have founded nonprofits. I'm so excited to share these powerful conversations. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Jasmine Lopez is the founder and executive director of the Firehouse Dream. As a Latina creative and mental health advocate, Jasmine believes that in order to build thriving lives, we must have a healthy relationship with self, the world, and money. She spends her days at TFD casting vision, dreaming big with and for the community, building strong relationships and partnerships while partnering with the next generation of creatives. Outside of TFD, she spends her time with her family and being actively present with her neighbors. Let's get into this episode. All right, I am so excited to have Jasmine Lopez back on the mic. She was one of my first guests on the Elevating La Cultura podcast back in 2021 when we were filming in our home, like in person. And I was way more nervous back then, but I wanted to have her back because this whole season has been about nonprofits. And I thought, what better person to close out the season than Jasmine Lopez, and talking about how far the Firehouse Dream has come since our first episode like 3 years ago. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey, I was so excited to be here. I cannot believe that was like 3 years ago. But I am Jasmine Lopez, the co-founder, executive director of the Firehouse Dream, and we exist to be a safe space for BIPOC youth between the ages of 13 and 22 so that they can thrive in every area of their lives. We do this through creative entrepreneurship, financial wellness, and mental health because we believe in order to have a thriving life, we have to have a healthy relationship with self, money, and the world. And I'm also a mom to 3 beautiful girls. I have a husband. We're living in a new community. It's just been wild.
Yes. And we had just traveled to Las Vegas, and I was able to hear you introduce yourself and the Firehouse Dream to several people. And I am just proud of how far you've come in the past, like, what, 6 years, 7 years that it's been like just an idea.
Yeah, so from dreaming was like 2017, and then we launched it in 2018, but then it took another year to get a 501(c)(3). So it's wild. So I'm like, when do we say we were officially founded? So I say 2018 from when like we filed with the state.
Yes, and I have been with you since the beginning, and I feel like I have played like all of the roles. I have helped with mentorship and leading workshops in the Firehouse Dream. Back when we had to pivot and offer different programming during the pandemic. I was the treasurer at one point. I was. I am currently the president of the Firehouse Dream now. And so I have just been like with you since the beginning and filling the roles as they've come up and been needed to be filled. And so I am just so proud of the work that we've been doing as a whole and the lives that we've been able to touch and impact. But yeah, I'd love for you to give a brief overview of how things have shifted and pivoted since the 2018, since you filed. And I know it's going to be a wild ride because things have shifted and pivoted so much. But I'm just so proud of the resilience of everyone on the team and the board, and just like co-creating with the community as the needs have come up. So I'm going to let you take it away and share with us all of the pivots and the journey that the Firehouse Dream has seen since 2018.
Yeah, if you were to tell me we were gonna start a nonprofit literally months before the pandemic like hits, I would have been like, no, girl, I ain't doing this. But I think in the midst of so many challenges and adversaries, it taught me what it means and looks like to pivot well in partnership with our neighbors, right? And our unique approach with the work that we do at the Firehouse Dream is one, we deeply value co creating. We never assume that we have the answers or the solutions for our neighbors. And so we host dreaming sessions with our youth in our community to talk about what our programming should look like. We have general ideas, right? We come into this space and we facilitate it in a way that's authentic and intentional with some ideas in the forefront or pillars like mental health and financial wellness. But we never say, like, this is exactly what our programming is going to look like without the input of our community. And so we officially got our 501(c)(3) in September of 2019. And I'm like, yay, we finally could do it. We had some seed donors who like helped fund and get us started and being able to buy the equipment and the tools we needed to get started. I was stoked. And then I finally overcame the challenges of getting into the local high school to start doing programming in the high school. And that happened in January of 2020. So finally I have like relationship, building it up with the youth, and then bam, everything stops. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So now, well, so then we've pivoted. So in every season it's been, okay, what can we do within the parameters of what we have based on the budget we have, but then also within the parameters of what the government says we can do. And so I remember we were limited to 10 youth, like we can only have 10 people in our property. And so I was like, okay, well, what if we do a mentorship program? And so that's when I called like a board meeting. Do you remember that? And I was like, hey, I have this crazy idea. We only have like 20K left in the bank account, and I think we can make this work. And you guys heard my idea, and it was basically saying instead of trying to find different youth for every workshop that we were trying to host, what does it look like to bring the same group of youth into our space over a 12-week period where they then can be able to learn about creative entrepreneurship, financial wellness, and mental health. And our first pilot had 5 youth who participated in it, and it was like wild. Everybody loved it. We had a huge wait list for the next one to start. We were like, what did we do? At that time, we got Sony's partnership and a bunch of other grants that came in. And we were like, okay, let's keep doing this. And then before we knew it, we did 4 rounds of mentorship, had 33 youth come through our program to do deep intentional programming. And then we hit a wall. Donations stopped coming in, funding stopped. And I was like, oh, shoot, what am I going to do? What do we do? And before I knew it, I had to lay off my entire team, minus one person, my executive assistant, Maya, who's my ride or die, as the staff. And was just like, man, our bank account hit negative at one point, and I was so discouraged. I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I thought this was gonna be my end all be all. I remember us meeting and having a really hard conversation and looking at the numbers, and you telling me this is not sustainable. Like, we need to make some decisions. But I did not feel the sense or the urgency to shut down, because that was one of the questions we were pondering through. Like, does this mean the season of the Firehouse Dream has come to an end? And I'm not someone who fights the closing of seasons. And so I was very confused because our bank account looked very different than what I was feeling internally, right? And it was this huge challenge because I was like, I don't get it. Make it make sense. How do we do this work without the funding? And we got creative. Maya and I held it down for like 8 or 9 months by ourselves doing our programming, and we did not skip a beat. But what we ended up finding out was that during COVID, our youth and families had no problem coming into our space because they were doing school virtually. But then the second that they went back into the school building, getting in-person participation was really a challenge. So we were listening again and saying, okay, what pivots do we need to make so that we can be able to continue to do the work that we're doing? And so we heard challenges like, transportation, I have to work, I have a job, so I can't miss work in order to be able to participate in programming. And so we got really curious around those challenges. Additionally, at the same time, we had just experienced our 4th loss to suicide, and it really deeply impacted us as a team, especially with Maya, because she knew each of the students that had passed away to suicide. And that's when I was really like, we say that mental health is a pillar, but we're facilitating and curating the space around what does it look like to have a space and a place that offers connection, belonging, but what else can we do? And that's when we said we don't want to continue to be we don't want to be reactive to the needs of our youth. What does it look like to be proactively working in partnership with community and youth to continue to destigmatize mental health, specifically in BIPOC spaces, right? And so we gathered a group of youth again together and we hosted a dreaming session. And we said, hey, if we were to put a resource kit together that can help normalize these topics about feelings and what it looks like to journal and all of these things, what would you want to see inside of it? And based on their feedback, we created this beautiful tool that is our mental health kit. And we co created and designed it with our youth. So the youth who went through our programming then helped us design the contents that are inside this mental health kit. So we have journal prompts, pens, stickers that were hand illustrated by our youth. We have a QR code where we can watch other youth stories and journeys through mental health, as well as we partnered with a yoga instructor to do like breath work exercises with us. So it's this really like comprehensive resource that we just pass out for free to our youth. And we launched it in 2022, at the end of 2022. And from then to now, we've given out over 2,300 mental health kits for free. And we want to just continue to like spread this reach. We're dreaming about what does it look like to go national with this. And then also realizing like what it looks like to be a hyper local nonprofit that focuses on the BIPOC youth within the Chicagoland area. And so the next step we took in pivoting was what would it look like to bring our programming directly in the schools? So for the last year and a half, we have been able to do programming in each of our 3 high schools between passing out the mental health kits, being a part of Mental Health Club, and being part of the calm spaces where we can provide support as well as programming to our youth in each of our high schools.
Both of my kids have the big bag of feelings, which is the mental health kits, and they have been instrumental in their mental health journey. I remember I got it for them when they were just starting therapy and even before they started therapy. um, I think my son was the one who was in therapy first and like showed it to his therapist, and she was just like, this is amazing. Where can I find more of these? And I think it was before my daughter started therapy, and it was a way for her to start thinking through like how she wanted to process feelings. And like even now I can see the feelings wheel right next to my son's desk. It has been instrumental in my kids' lives and just normalizing being able to talk about feelings and process things that might seem big but are able to be like talked about in a conversation between family, between therapy sessions. And I think that is a huge part in the youth being able to form that emotional intelligence and being able to say it's okay when things are hard and we can process through them, and it's okay to process through them. I think that's something that like our generation didn't necessarily have access to or understand how to do it. So even in my adult life, like I am learning a lot through the Firehouse Dream and the programming, and I think it is just a huge asset to the community as a whole and to the youth especially. But it also is a bridge between generations because the workshops that you offer at the Firehouse Dream aren't just for youth, like it involves the parents or the community as a whole. So I'd love to talk about, or for you to share more about that specific programming and how you are bridging generations.
Yeah, absolutely. So we host community workshops at the Firehouse, and that is an invitation for everybody to participate. So we do different workshops like yoga, financial wellness, on money healing. I facilitate that topic. And last week, we just had an art therapist come through and they did a clay and identity project. And that was amazing. It sold out. We had 12 people sign up for it. And it was just so neat to see parents with their children engaging in a creative way to express feelings, emotions, and their own identity, right? And I think that is ultimately at the core of what we do. We want to use creativity as a healing tool. How can we not only use this tool to generate income, right? Because the creative industry brings in over 900 billion dollars, but that can get us only so far. Yes, we need financial stability. We need opportunities like that, but also how do we use this tool to promote healing in multitudes of ways and capacities? And so ultimately, that's what we're trying to do. We partner with different facilitators who come in and lead these topics so that our families and youth get to experience different modalities around what healing looks like. Because ultimately, in BIPOC spaces, mental health, in my opinion, has been so westernized under this mindset that we should just go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy. And talk therapy is a way we can heal. It's a tool. It's a beautiful tool that has been developed in evidence. It's evidence-based and all of those things. But culturally, we experience healing in so many facets and it's very nuanced. And so I'm in this season of exploring and helping bring our community into what does it look like to lean into our cultural practices to heal, whether that's through food, storytelling, music, murals, art. All of this is interconnected with throughout the generations of how we have used art as healing, resistance to bring awareness to the challenges and barriers our communities face. And so I think it's a both and. I deeply, deeply, deeply believe in the clinical professional approach to mental health while also saying our community approach to mental health and to help destigmatize the topic of mental health creatively and in our cultural interconnectedness is also just as valid and important.
Yes, and I think that's something that we have been striving as a organization to really elevate the creative fields because like you said, culturally it is a form of resistance and the westernized idea is to separate that. And I feel like a lot of us have grown up thinking that if you pursue a creative field, then you're not going to have enough to live off of essentially, and that like a creative field is should just be a hobby. But in reality, like when we tap into our creativity and we can be like given the tools to make a business out of it and bring in the finance piece and bring in the mental health piece, like there is opportunity for people to thrive in the creative fields. And I think not only can you create a business, which we both have, and but we can also be healing through that business and through that creativity. And so I just remember the first mentorship group, or one of the first ones. I can't remember exactly if it was the first or the second, but there were a lot of youth that from that have gone to create businesses and to gone to pour into their skills to then generate income from that. And I think that is so encouraging and so powerful. And when I saw that, and even like we partner with them now in the programming that we offer, and to see that, I'm like, yes, this is what we set out to do in the first place. And to have people come back and support the Firehouse, even through like even though they've gone through the mentorship and have gone to graduate, for them to come back and want to be part of it is a huge testament to what to the safe space that was created through the relationships and the programming together.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, yeah, for me as a photographer who experienced upward mobility through this creativity or this creative form outlet, I also didn't realize how healing photography was for me, because for so long I believed that my voice and my story didn't matter. And this, photography is basically just visual storytelling. And so this tool allowed me to have an opportunity to feel seen, to have a voice, to feel like what I'm trying to share mattered. And I felt a heavy responsibility around what that looked like, not only to use it as a form of provision for myself and my family, but also to really highlight and center the stories that I deeply cared about. And so that's what we try to do at the Firehouse Dream, is invite our youth to think about whatever creativity they're interested in. How can you not just only generate income on it off of it, but how can you use this tool to bring awareness, to highlight your voice, your story, or the voices of your community that you deeply care about? And so it's been really neat and powerful to see. It's wild because all 33 youth now have graduated high school. And so they're either in the workforce or in college. And so we have a large percentage in college who have decided to pursue a creative major, some in finance as well, and mental health. And so it's just really neat to see them be like, oh my gosh, okay, I can actually create this to be a career. And, a lot of them reach out to us and are like, hey, I have a pricing question, or hey, I have this creative project idea I'm looking to do. Like, what do I need to do for permits? Or hey, I have my first wedding I'm photographing. Can we rent some equipment for this, for this wedding? And that's something we also provide, is access and opportunity for them, where they don't have to wait to get access to the tools. We allow them to rent it for free so that they can start building out their portfolio and taking clients as soon as possible.
One of the things that I really appreciate about you and your leadership is that you keep it real and you share authentically, truthfully, vulnerably about the challenges that you have come up against through this nonprofit. I think a lot of us have come to see nonprofits as like, oh, they're doing great, they're serving communities, they have no issues because they get funding through grants. But being on the inside of things, we realized how hard it is, especially for nonprofits that are co-founded, led by BIPOC individuals, and specifically Latinas. Um, it is a challenge when it comes to funding specifically, but also managing a team that is managing a team where we incorporate the values of the nonprofit. There are lots of nonprofits that I've heard that are like, well, they're not really for the team. Like what you see on the outside is not necessarily what people are experiencing on the inside. And you have been intentional about creating a safe space internally with the team, which I think is a huge testament to who you are as a person, and have kept even like the team accountable as they are navigating through relationships with each other and outwardly. It's not just saying things just to say things for the youth, but you put into practice everything that you put out there for through programming, like, and take that internally. And I just really appreciate it. But I'd love for you to talk through some of the challenges that we faced as an organization, because I think some like that is not always talked about. And I think for us to be able to talk about the challenges and how we've overcome them or are pushing boundaries to overcome them is very important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. How much time we got for this, girl?
I know. Ugh.
So much I can speak into. And even in that, I want to be very asset based when we talk about
Mhm.
this. One, let me just briefly mention the barriers and challenges that exist, right? One, Latino led programming gets less than 2 cents of the philanthropic pie. So when philanthropy asks, how do you plan to be sustainable? But sometimes I want to reply back and be like, what are you doing to give us more of the pie? Because we barely get any, right? But there's this inner conflict and challenge around what does it look like to do this work authentically and intentionally while also not self-sacrificing and burning myself out or my team out. And so after the fourth mentorship, when we were like out of funds, I remember we were doing a strategic planning meeting, and the facilitator was like, I'm going to recommend that Jasmine takes a sabbatical and let her just have some time to rest. And I had no idea how much I needed that, how much I needed to process through everything I had been experiencing. Because mind you, for the first mentorship, I was like basically almost volunteering. I think I was getting like a little stipend, but I was giving the organization my full time attention, basically 40 plus hours to do this work. And I think in the nonprofit sector, there's this martyrdom approach where it's like, man, I'm doing good work. And so I'm going to do it no matter the cost. And during my sabbatical, I realized, man, that's not that I didn't get into the nonprofit sector to do it the way that everybody else is doing it. I came into this space to reimagine what it looks like to do this work where our internal decisions match and reflect what we're saying on the outside. Otherwise, we're just being hypocritical about what we say we do and how we do this work. And so I was really challenged in my moment of rest to say, what does it look like to show up authentically and intentionally, but have better boundaries and capacity, and better boundaries around the capacity that we actually have as an organization. And after you and I had our meeting around like, hey, this is not sustainable, is when I said, okay, no longer can I give if the organization's not at a place to pay me a full-time salary and benefits, then I can no longer give it my full-time attention. That is an unfair ask of me, and it's an unfair ask of my team. And so we have been really intentional around how do we honor our capacity and our boundaries? What do we say yes and no to? And then how do we honor rest as a restorative practice? Because historically, as women of color, as a woman of color led team, we already know the disparities that exist with the wage gap and the wealth gap, right? And so we're like, we don't want to be perpetuating these same challenges and barriers that exist in society because we're doing good work, or taking on the savior complex because if we don't do this work, then who will? Which is such a false mentality to take. The reality is that there is so much work to do that we're not going to be able to solve it. And so, what does it look like to show up within my capacity, within our box of boundaries, and to do it diligently, authentically, and intentionally, and then take moments of rest and release, and then come back into the work, and then pivot and shift and do all the things we need to do. And so, man, funding is the greatest challenge. I think there's a lot of data out there that talks about in philanthropy, BIPOC led organizations experience more strings attached to dollars being donated to them than our white led nonprofits. And so there's these like very discouraging data that is very real, and I fully acknowledge it. But I try not to be like, man, I try not to. I'm angry and I'm frustrated about it, but I try to not allow those disparities and challenges to take away from the work we are doing, because the work we do is good and is beautiful and it is making an impact. And whether or not I feel overlooked as a leader, which oftentimes I do, whether or not I feel alone in this work sometimes, or I feel disconnected, or I feel like, man, I wish money wasn't the only thing that like determined what we can and can't do. I'm sitting in the space of limitless dreaming and just being like, man, what could be for my community and my neighbors? How do we continue to do this work? How do we continue to learn from ways that we've crossed our boundaries as a team in saying yes to certain things and then realizing, oh shoot, we probably shouldn't have said yes to this? And how do we readjust so that we are authentically doing this work in a way that withstands our longevity, and where we're not having high turnover, where we're not burning out, because we are centering rest, because we are honoring our capacities, because we're recognizing that we need mental health days, we need time to pull away and disconnect and process. And so it's this kind of ebb and flow of trying to figure it out, but it's hard. I'll say it's not easy. It's very easy to get lost in the busyness. Um, there was a season, I remember a week where it was like just back to back, full things to do. And I remember looking in the mirror and telling God, like, I can see why people get lost in doing too much and saying yes to too much because this feels good. And then let my ego not get so conflated to the place of feeling like this matters more than honoring my time, my body, my family, my loved ones, and my neighbors. And so that is a constant conviction. I'm challenging, what do I say yes to? What do I say no to? How do I guide and lead my team? Man, being a boss is hard. I was not prepared to be a boss. I was not trained to be a boss. And so I've had to learn a lot around how to love people well, my team well, how to support them, how to show up, how to see them, how to even help them feel a sense of growth and development in their own leadership, being empowered and equipped, knowing that they can do it. Because oftentimes, again, as women of color, we are not invested in as leaders. So, what does it look like to take time to intentionally invest in my team, where they feel like their voice and their agency matters too? So, I'll pause here because there's so much I can say. But man, I am constantly debriefing and taking the time to pause and reassess what shifts we need to make so that we are honoring our rest, our boundaries, and our capacity.
So let me tell you, when we had the strategic planning session and the sabbatical was the clear choice, I was freaking out. I mean, you probably didn't see it because I'm very like, okay. But internally, I was like, how did we get so far as to like burn out? Like, because we as a board were burnt out, as a team, everyone was burnt out. And it was like, okay, well, we need to stop right now or we're going to like crash this thing. And it was probably the best decision that we could have made. And I love that we have put it into practice. Like, like we schedule sabbaticals like regularly
Yes,
for everyone.
annually. Yes,
Yes.
for everyone. Mhm.
So would you mind just briefly sharing like what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of us are moms or students in college. And so we have flexible schedules. We want to be able to do the both and as moms. We want to be able to work and make collective impact while also being able to be present and showing up for our kiddos. And so we have flexible schedules. Our schedule is based around when schools are in operation basically. So it really depends on when the school year starts, but we get 2 weeks off for Christmas, winter holiday. We get spring break. We try to be really flexible and make it in a way where it's not like just one spring break based on our current school district's kiddo schedule, because each of us, our kids are like in different schedules. And so last year we got to take off the week of spring break that our kids were off so that we could be off during when our kids off and be fully present and have that week off. And then in the summer, we take the month of July off or we get 2 weeks off. It depends on, again, it depends on when the school year starts because we do need a month to pre-plan all of our programming before the semester starts. But there is this intentional conversation around, okay, what does rest look like? How do we honor that? And how do we take like a break from it, right? Because oftentimes there's also like some other nonprofits be like, oh my gosh, you're taking the month of July off? Like, how could you? And I'm like, yes, we need to rest. We need to like take time to be with our families and disconnect from this work because this work is hard. It is full. It requires a lot of energy and emotional labor to the point of where it's like, man, as a team, we deserve to disconnect. And so, yeah, we all get paid sabbaticals to take time. And we've just crafted our budget in this way to do this. If we're already paying a staff and it's in the budget and we get 2 weeks off, why am I not going to pay my staff that? It's in the budget. Like it's been approved. Like let's just honor our staff well. And this is one of the many ways we try to see our team really well. We recently got another grant where like, man, we can't necessarily offer like a full benefits package, but what does it look like to co-create like a wellness stipend based on what your individual needs are? And so some of our staff has recently grown. So not everyone was a part of this grant, but the team that was when we got approved for this grant, they are getting a wellness stipend on top of their salary to be able to, decide how they want to use that, whether that's working out at a gym, mental health services, however they want to use it, they get complete agency over it. We don't dictate what that looks like. And so for me, though, there's just some ways that we're like, man, this is how we're going to honor rest. And then what does pay equity look like? That's a constant question I'm continuously asking too. How are we making sure we're paying our team an equitable rate? I use the MIT living wage to help inform that for me. And oh my gosh, from when we started to where we are now, it's gone up from like $15 to $17 to 22. Now it's at 25. And so I feel like I'm sometimes playing catch up, but I just have to take a breath and just be like, okay, Jasmine, this is a value of ours, pay equity. So we're going to honor what this looks like. And now we're going to reassess the budget and make sure that our budget is reflecting what our values look like. And then, and then the following questions are just how are we going to do that? Do we have the funding to sustain that? What does this look like? But honestly, when you treat your team well and you pay your team equitably and you see them as people and not what they do for you, is when they like stick with you. They become your ride or dies. They stick with you throughout the entire process. And they're just like grateful to be doing this work. And we're always having these open conversations around what does it look like to support each other well in each season.
Yeah, and I think we have these conversations when we're talking about corporate America because like at a job you're given like the benefits, you're told to like know your worth, to ask for your pay raise or whatnot. And sometimes when you think of nonprofits, you're thinking like, oh, well, you should just be serving the community. And I love the fact that you model like what we are talking about in corporate America too, like for us to be able to advocate, for us to be able to be paid equitably, but you're taking that and inserting that into the nonprofit space. And I think the more that we do that, the more that we talk about that vulnerably, the more it will be a change throughout the nonprofit space. And I just admire that way of leadership so much. And I have learned so much from you as far as like how you run the nonprofit and have been able to implement that in my own life as well. And making sure that I am taking some time to rest, to take the 2 weeks. And I mean, we talk about PTO in a job. And so why not having that in the nonprofit space too? Like they are the team and should be able to be compensated for all of the hard work that they're doing throughout the rest of the year. So talking about funding, I know that when we were building the mentorship program, like, and during the pandemic, like a lot of funding came in and we like really appreciated and were wise with how we were looking at this funding, but we did not project it ending a few years after the pandemic started. And that's when we found ourselves in that hole and saying, like, we need to like do something about this income because we are seeing that it is not as plentiful as it was when we started. And so, how have we shifted, and how have you done things differently as far as like hiring help in order to continue the grant process, grants coming in?
Yeah. So, well, here's the thing. As a nonprofit, we need, like, we're a business still. We need to operate like a business. So, we need diverse revenue streams. And I think my biggest learning from that season was that we had not had a full turnaround or a full year of funding yet. So, I didn't know the ebbs and flows of what funding looked like, right? Like in the creative field in Chicago, we know that the winter and, January to April is extremely dead, right? So you need to pre-plan and make sure you have proper cash flow to maintain those 4 months that are extremely slow until your season restarts again. That's kind of similar in the grant season, like grant writing cycles, but I didn't know that. So I didn't know how much for us it was going to slow down between that January and like May stretch of months that it we had enough funding to get us through our fourth mentorship, but then once that ended and we had nothing else. And so I got together with my business consultant and said, hey, like we really need to put together like a diverse funding model. What does that look like? And I've learned how to write grants, but I'm not the best at individual donors, or I don't know anything about sponsorships or, and so we've been kind of dreaming up like little by little, what does it look like to bring in diverse revenue streams, and even if that's through like fee for service. So me facilitating workshops in partnership with other organizations, or we just did a project where we were hired to photograph 10 organizations and I brought youth with me. And so I'm being paid equitably through that. Our youth are getting paid and then the nonprofit gets a part of it. And so it's just thinking through creative ways to help sustain and self-fund the organization. I'm not gonna lie, we are definitely very dependent and reliant on grants right now, but we're hoping over the next several handful of years that we can be able to move and shift more into like having more diverse revenue streams. But we applied for this one grant that was a capacity building grant, which allowed for us to write in the friend or the wellness stipends and to be able to hire a development coordinator who can help really take on the initiative, the boldness, and the courage to develop our fundraising. And so it's hard. It just takes so much time. And so we're currently hiring for that. We had someone in the role, but she's making a career change. And so now we're in the process of going through that process again of hiring. And that is like one of the most hardest things to do. It's so daunting. It's very challenging. But I feel like in every hire I've made, I've learned something new in the process around like, oh, okay, because I don't come from that space. I didn't work in corporate, right? I'm creative entrepreneurship. Like I just did photography. So what does it look like to interview people, hire people, all of those things? And so I'm leaning on my business consultant and others who do have the experience to help guide what those questions look like and the hiring practices and all of those things. But all that to say, funding is so, so hard. And I wish that the system wasn't so broken. And so that's why I want to sit in the space of curiosity and reimagination around what funding our work can look like.
Hmm. Speaking of funding, where can people find information to support? I know that the Firehouse Dream does campaigns and like regularly, and there's never a wrong time to give.
Yes,
And
never.
yes, so how can people support the Firehouse?
Yeah, so we believe in our ecosystem. Let me talk about that first. So we believe that we are an ecosystem, and every ecosystem, in order for it to thrive, we need every part of the system to be a part of it. And that includes our giving partners. And our giving partners, we have had an individual who has given $2 every single month, recurring for the last several years. And her contribution is just as important and valid and valued by us as someone who maybe could potentially give more. But you can give and be a part of our ecosystem at thefirehousedream.org/give. We are doing various different fundraisers. Right now, we're preparing to close out Hispanic Heritage Month. And yeah, and you can donate there or you can give. We're on all the socials, so you can donate through those platforms. There's pros and cons throughout every avenue of what giving looks like, but ultimately our website's the best space and place because that's where you can get connected. You can get added to our newsletter where you can continue to learn about the work we're doing. We give, oh my gosh, we, as a creative arts nonprofit, we deeply value like making sure we are communicating with our partners what we're doing. And so we send like monthly newsletters about programming. We invite you to join us in our fundraising campaigns. And then we also invite you, if you're local, to be a part of our workshops and to enjoy this community space that we're really building out.
All right. And we have learned so much since the conception of the Firehouse Dream. And I am just so proud of you. I look up to you in all areas, business, like leadership, finance, like all the things. But I'd love for you to share some wisdom or advice or encouragement to someone who is starting out in the nonprofit space or looking to start a nonprofit.
Yeah, I'll share what my mentor shared with me. They said, Jasmine, in any area that you feel like you're lacking, there is someone in your space, in your ecosystem, who has the tools, the skills, and the ability to help you. So do not be afraid to ask for help. I think that's been like my biggest thing. So whenever I've needed something and I don't know that, and that's not within my skill set, I'll drop it on Facebook or Instagram in my stories and I'll say, hey, I'm looking for someone who can help me with XYZ. And oftentimes we get connected and I have had just such huge champions of individuals who have really helped pour into the Firehouse Dream. I mean, even with the Sony grant, we got it because someone dropped it in my DM and was like, "Hey, check out this grant. I think you guys could be a great fit for it." So I think that's part of the cool thing in starting a nonprofit is share your story, get it out there, whether it's just on social media, because that's how we found our seed donors. I didn't even know seed donors existed when I started this nonprofit, but we had two families who came and was just like, hey, we want to like give some startup funds to help you start this nonprofit. We do social media campaigns with donations, and we just got like, again, anytime I'm discouraged, I'm just like, man, social media has been an amazing, powerful tool for me with our nonprofit. We just got an individual donor who gave towards this campaign that we're doing for our mental health kits, and she found us randomly through reels, and she was like, love what you're doing and I'm sending you guys a donation. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I think we have to get to a space of inviting others in as we do this work and not be afraid to ask for help.
Mm, yes. And I think that is something that we as women and culturally are working against those conditioned ideas. And I think it is an asset when we're able to kind of push against like that way of thinking of like, oh, we can do this by ourselves. Like, no, if you need help, there's no shame in asking for help. And I think the more we talk about that, the more we can start like healing through that. And so,
Yes.
yes, thank you so much for sharing this. I mean, we can talk, we usually do talk like
Yes.
for a long time. But I'm just so thankful for your time, and we will definitely have you back again. I feel like as my first guest and now as a guest closing out season 10, you will definitely be back at some point before I retire this podcasting. um,
Absolutely.
but
Karina, can
yes.
I just say like how amazing you are and just not just in our friendship, but in your partnership with the organization. You were the first person I asked to be on my board. I remember, and I think it was the day of the first recording of the podcast where I was like, hey, I have this question to ask you. But the way that you have stood by my side, the way that we've had hard conversations, the way you've held me accountable, the ways that you have just been like, man, or I don't know how to help you with this. Like it has been so profound in the work that we're doing, and there is no way that this work could be done without your help and your support. And so I don't see this as like, look what Jasmine has done. I look at this as something that we've done together. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I was not expecting that. But yes, I appreciate your partnership in everything, in through the firehouse, through business, through just being friends. Um, yeah, I
Yes.
appreciate you. Well, share where people can connect with you. I know you shared where people can connect with the firehouse, but to close out, how can people find you?
Yeah, so on Instagram, you can follow us at the Firehouse Dream, or if you want to follow me personally, I am your friend Jasmine.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation, like all of our conversations. So I just thank you. And right now, you are not currently in Illinois, but I feel like I see you just as much because we just hung out in Los Angeles and we are going to see each other again in Atlanta. So if you follow either one of us, you see each other, like we see each
Yes.
other on our Instagram. So it's like we're still in the same place.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, we will see each other very soon. All right.
Okay,
Bye.
my friend.
I'm so grateful to Jasmine for giving us an update on where the Firehouse Dream has grown since our first season back in 2021. Okay, amigos, thank you so much for listening. There will be a new episode every Tuesday, so after you listen, feel free to take a screenshot to post on Instagram and tag at Elevating La Cultura or send me a DM. You can also comment on our YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So leave a review on Apple Podcasts so we can get more ears listening to these stories and we can continue elevating La Cultura. All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye.